You're listening to the Art Said podcast, season 3, episode number 5, Creativity as a Way of Being. Welcome to the Art Said podcast, conversations through the perspective of the arts and education, hosted by educators and artists Shauna Longo and Edric DeBose. Hey, Edric, how are we doing today?
I'm good. Got my coffee. I'm mostly awake.
I already finished mine in my meeting before this, so I should be good to go. All right, so today we thought we'd dig into creativity or being creative. What does that mean, and how do we as arts educators or just educators in general, you might not be an arts educator, how can you kind of make that a piece of what you do, how you do it within the classroom or just as a human being?
Right. I think sometimes the words creative or creativity get thrown around so much that you don't really understand. Sometimes there are layers to it, right? So, kind of today, what we're going to do is take apart some of those layers. We're talking about creativity broadly speaking, innovation in terms of science, or just being an artist. So, just to start, from the very beginning, human beings, right, are producing animals. We make things. So if you look back in the early history, there are paintings on the walls. There, paintings on the cave walls. There are, pottery. There's the jewelry. There are tools that are being made, and sometimes these tools are really decorated. You don't need those decorations, but it's kind of a thing that we do, and we add meaning to those things that we create, right? And some of those drawings that were on the walls become symbols that tell stories, right?
Right.
So some of the early writings, if you look at some of the cave paintings, I like to look at the cave paintings, and because there's one in particular that demonstrates how you go about hunting an animal. It's actually a diagram of, you have these guys over here, the animals are this way, the dogs are here, and it shows. So we derive meaning from these things that we create, and they're part of the culture.
And by the way, I think different people can derive different meanings from art, right? Not just visual art, but from music, from theater. Like everybody brings their experiences and their personalities, and to kind of make it have different meaning for them, and that's okay.
Well, it's just how it works. I mean, it's one of the things about creativity that we're going to get to talking about Rick Rubin's book at one point, but one of the things he talks about is that we're all creative. You create stories. You make you create. Say something that hasn't been done before. You combine things in a unique kind of way. And it's not necessarily about art. It's humans. We are creating meaning through our actions all the time. So creativity is something inherently it's part of us. So when you look at development of creativity, I'm using an example here of transportation, right? So you think about, again, going back early humans walking, right? Then you get the invention of wheels and horsepower, right? And using horse. Then you get to automobiles, right? And then you get to planes. I mean, tremendous leaps in creativity and tremendous leaps in especially collaboration. By the time you're talking about automobiles, there's a lot of people working on that particular problem. By the time you get to planes and flying, a lot more people. So. What drives these creative leaps? What's underneath these creativity? So I like looking at the work of Daniel Pink, especially the book Drive. So he talked about our needs, driven by our needs, and he focuses on 3 areas, and one is autonomy, right? We have this need to direct our own lives, to do our own thing, to make our own meaning, to live our lives the way we choose to. The next need we have is mastery. We need to learn things and create new things. It's something we want to do. It's because Daniel Pink studies work, right? And what's the psychology of work? What motivates people to get to do certain jobs? And he finds it's really not money. It's really these things: autonomy to do your own thing, mastery, and then purpose to do better by yourselves and in the world. Which again, I mean, because that's Bloom's taxonomy. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You want to become the best version of you that you can, right? So, to get more specific on certain kinds of creativity, I like this quote by Einstein. And he said, creativity is seeing what others see and thinking what no one else ever thought.
That's so brilliant.
Well, he's Einstein.
100%. Yes.
But it's about the thinking. It's not about the making. That's what I love about that. So
and that's what creativity is. It's the thoughts, not the product. And that's why as educators, there's this shift to the process versus the product. It's the creativity through the process. To what it becomes.
Right. So even with the standards, the way the standards are written. So first is then it's production, presentation, performance.
Then response, and then connecting it to the world.
But it starts
with
that thing about thinking.
But and I think that's why a lot of arts educators struggled when I'm using air quotes, new standards came out in 2020 because it was such a big shift
Yes.
from the old set of standards in terms of they were very skills based and you must know this. And it was very concept based. And all of a sudden teachers are like, wait, this doesn't tell me what. You're
Yeah.
like, no, it doesn't tell you what. It tells you the how and the why and where, and it gives you that room to really to create people who support the arts and enjoy the arts and are creative versus can tell me what a quarter note is or an eighth note or, yeah.
So it's really about taking those things that are the tools and doing something with them and making
Yep,
something.
absolutely.
So again, we want to talk about Rick Rubin's book here, The Creative Act: A Way of Being. I love the title because it really talks about a way of being, in the world. So what struck me first was an interview I saw with Rick Rubin when he was talking about the book, and he was talking about. He starts talking about worth it. What makes it worth it? And he said that worth it depends on an outcome, but the outcome is out of your control. You make the work, you send it out to the world, and
Yep.
whatever happens out in the world is what happens in the world, and you can't really control that. You don't really have a focus on. So all that you can really do is you can do the best work you can. The responsibility of the artist is to make the best thing that you possibly can. That's your job. So worrying about the outcome is not something it's just not that you can't really do it. You can't change the outcome by worrying about it. So it's really about the making and not what happens or what comes back to you, right? And
Right.
if you're worried about the outcome, it can take away from the value of the work. It won't be as
100%.
right. If you're trying to
Right.
make that song that everybody likes, it doesn't strike anybody in particular, right?
Right. Right. And it's okay if people don't like it. Like sometimes the best things comes out of like your best critics,
Right, right.
you know.
But it will find its place, and you can't
Mhm.
do it. I appreciate also Seth Godin, in the book called The Practice, right?
Such a good book.
That's a great book. But he talks about, but I love this quote though. It's like if we obsess about the outcome, we're looking for an industrial recipe, not a way to create art. And Seth Godin, he talks about that too. The way that the business model has taken over education and other things.
Yes.
And so it becomes this recipe for how lesson plan. I mean, that's some standards, but standardized tests, right? And
Yes.
benchmarks. But it's really about the industrial recipe. So focusing on the outcome, you're looking for a recipe. It's not about creating art. The first step is to separate the process from the outcome, right? That's that whole
Mhm.
thing. It's about the process, not the product.
Yep.
And he said, you do that not because you don't care about the outcome, but because we do.
And
Right?
that's really hard for people to think about it that way. Like, wait, if I like don't care, you care about the outcome, but you're more concerned about how you get there than
Because you
getting
want to
there.
do the best work you can. You
Yeah.
want to do the best work you can. So anything that inhibits that, you don't want that to take away from it. So the idea of a way of being. So creativity is, as I understand it, it's really about holding certain ideas in mind. It's a living, breathing practice. I was actually just saw something a little while ago. It was Dave Frusciante, guitar player for Red Hot Chili Peppers, and he
Oh,
was
yeah.
and he literally said, "I love playing guitar. I love practicing. Every day I practice." He said, "It's how I get in touch with myself. It's how I get in touch with my world." So that is why he's a great guitar player, not because he's up on the stage or thing. It's he loves playing, and
Yeah.
it's
He
really
loves putting in the time and the effort, like to hone his craft and knowing that he's made it, but he doesn't feel like he's ever made it, right? He's constantly trying to get better and to push himself out of his comfort zone to continue to evolve as a musician.
right. It's about the evolution.
Yeah.
Making it doesn't really, I think, matter. So it's really about holding those kinds of things in mind. And again, it's not like a magic pair of gloves you put on like right before you start working. It's so
Wouldn't that be in a way that would be nice, but it's not.
so another quote by Rick Rubin, he said, "The energy exists on the journey to the making, not in the constructing." Right.
Yep.
So you're creative all the time. You're creating all the time. You're thinking about things. It's the subconscious mind is working on the idea while you're sleeping. You're walking down the street like, hey, you see that particular thing. All that's part of the creative process. Now, to get more specific, though, when you talk about arts as an artist, well, Rubin says that to live as an artist is a way of being in the world. It's a way of perceiving and a practice of paying attention. And that, I think, is, again, one of the values of what education in the arts is about, is like you learn how to pay attention. There's certain
Yeah,
things.
and that circles back to his title, A Way of Being. Like you have to always be cognizant and aware and paying attention to the little things or the big things and making connection amongst them to
Right.
then be able to use them in a creative way as part of your process.
Right. So
It's just being open to everything around you at all times a day. It's not like, okay, I have to be hyper focused. No, I just need to, and I may take it in and not know why, when, where, or how I'm going to use it, but eventually
right.
this will make sense.
Right.
Or I'll be able to turn it into something else, right? As a part of that continual process. It is a way of being.
I think underneath that, though, for me, is it's about connection, because that
100%. It's all about making connections.
and paying attention, you're connecting one thing to another thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Carl Rogers said the personal is the universal. So the personal is what makes art matter, right? Our point of view, not our drawing skills or musical virtuosity or ability to tell a story. It's our being able to communicate and make connections to our points of view. So we create to express who we are and where we are in our journey at that moment in time. And our journey is going to keep taking us places. And if we stop creating, we're not communicating like who we are and where we are, right? So we create kind of a mirror in which someone could see our own hidden reflection. That's really what creating is giving people, a mirror into who we are.
right, which creates an opportunity to have a conversation and to make a connection. And again,
Absolutely.
you know about Carl Rogers, I mean, psychologist, his whole thing was self-actualization, becoming the best person that you can be. And
Yes.
yet the whole thing about the personal is the universal, right?
Yeah.
That's something I discovered as a songwriter. Like I used to write these songs that were, well, you know, these political and, you know, about these issues, and you know, I didn't after a certain while I didn't want to sing them anymore, and the things I was singing about, those issues had passed. But when you
Mhm.
start talking about personal things and really talk about that's when I realized that it wasn't that people began to connect with my music more and my songs more, because it was about emotion, and we all have these emotional responses to things. It wasn't even
Right.
something logical or made sense. It was just
Right.
this emotional experience, and that was what the connection came from. So they had those personal things. We talk about those personal things. Sometimes it's an easier way for people to understand and get to you, because we all experience those kinds of specific personal things.
Well, I'm going to throw out there, it's like Bob Dylan,
Okay.
right? As a musician and a composer and songwriter, and what he brought was a different way of looking at the world, right? And he was able to put what was happening into the world through his perspective and connect with people.
Right.
But it was really his perspective. It was his way of being.
Yeah. And
And there's a countless musicians out there, by the way. He just popped into my head.
he's a good example, though, because
Amazing.
it was about this evolution, though. He began as a folk singer, was really embraced by the folk crowd in the early '60s, and
Right.
then he started bringing these electric guitars in there.
And people are like, oh, what are you doing? Yeah.
Right, but
Right.
maintain a certain kind of integrity as a poet, especially.
Yes.
Um,
Yep.
So just to quote again, go back to Seth Godin, but he talks about the creative work. He understands that it's really about protecting the process, but he also says that it's important that the work has to be shipped. The way he says it is, it doesn't count if you don't share it, right?
Yes.
And I think that again just underscores the need for connection and belonging, because it's, you know, you create the work and then you want to share it. But again, that's underneath that. It really becomes the work as you share it. But underneath that is, yeah, the opportunity for connection.
Well, and I think that a lot of artists in whatever art form they choose struggle with that. Like, when is it time to just rip the band-aid off and put it out into the world?
Right.
And that's really hard because it's so connected to who we are as a person, right? We're sharing that. And so sometimes it's hard to like let the world see that opened wound or whatever it may be, because it's so deeply connected to who we are. So yeah, I agree though. Like, you've got to put it out there, or else um, it doesn't give that meaning and that connection for others. And the other way to think about this is like when we're doing this work, we're creating with the objective of simply doing great work, like a ripple effect occurs, right? In doing the work you do, it can inspire others to want to do their best too, right? Greatness begets greatness. It's infectious. And I think that it's really important when we're talking about within our schools and education as educators, arts educators or non-arts educators, you know, as an educator, who your leader is within your building or district can really impact you and your creative being, right? So you need someone that gets it, that understands that creative process and can support it. That Edric and I have been we've had people on both sides of the spectrum. Okay. So I'm just going to throw that out there. We've had people that totally don't get the creative process and barely, I've had administrators come in when I was early in my career and they'd observe me teaching. They'd send me their write up and I'd have to completely rewrite it for them because they didn't understand a lick of what was happening in my classroom. And so the key was they were willing to kind of get out of my way versus put up roadblocks. But sometimes they'll put up roadblocks because they don't understand it. But when you have someone that understands the creative process and can give you that freedom as an educator to create, to try, to fail, to have lessons that totally flop. Edric and I have said this a number of times on this podcast, and we will continue to shout it from the rooftops. Everything is not going to go perfect all the time. You are going to try lessons with your kids that are going to be epic fails. Mm-hmm. We've done it. Just saying. We've done it together. We've done it separately. Right. And the kids know it. So you just admit it and you try something else. And it's okay because it's also good for them to see us, for lack of a better term, fail sometimes, to know that like, hey, I didn't shut down. Like the world will move on. I will try something different next time. Like, and so I think it's really important just to put out there that if you aren't happy in your situation, sometimes you just need to change your situation to surround yourself with people that can support you on this creative journey, because it is a way of being and you have to have someone that understands that to really give you that support in the process.
Right. So yeah, it's always going to be about risk. I mean, risk will never go away, right?
100%.
And that, again, if you understand the creative process, you're gonna make up. It's gonna be a lot of work that does not work, but from that, hopefully, we learn. But yes, creating a team and some people that can just encourage or even just see what you're doing is important.
Absolutely. All right, and then last we want to talk about the recovery phase, right? Practice gets us part of the way there. Then it takes time for practice to be absorbed into the body. Rick Rubin calls that the recovery phase. And I love this term. It really kind of spoke to me because I am that person that I was working on a project at work over about 3 months. And the end result to someone that views it probably thinks it took me like 10 minutes to throw together because it seems somewhat simple. But it actually took me months of like thinking about it, mulling it over, stepping away for a few weeks, coming back to it for maybe just 10 minutes, putting a little more down on paper, having a meeting with someone to brainstorm and talk it through. And here's my philosophy and here's what I've been thinking and kind of fine tune it. And so I think we also need to be aware that like people, it's not about your process. They just want to see what it ends up being a little bit. But I think when you give them the insight into your process, it gives them deeper meaning to connect with your work, right? And so that passive element of practice is just as important as the active one. So even though I stepped away for a week or a month and would come back to it, I was still working through the creative process, even when I was not actively engaged with the work. It was still happening in that like recovery phase to be able to get to the next step. So there are benefits to taking breaks, step away, return later. It's okay. I mean, sometimes we have a time crunch and it makes it hard. But I think for me, that's why I'm, if you haven't noticed through this podcast, a type A person. And Edric is laughing, but not out loud. I'm really big on starting things really early and then stepping away and then coming back and seeing them kind of with fresh eyes. And I really believe in that whole like live with it for a while and then come back to it to really get your best work, right? And recovery at the opportune time is going to cause greater leaps in improvement. Like you have to know when you're feeling like the creative juices to step back. Okay, it's time to bring this work back and dig in. And that's really, I will tell you, happened. That was exactly my process this past spring on a curriculum project I was working on. And then all of a sudden I was like, okay, I'm in a headspace where I'm ready to kind of dig back into this. And like 2-3 months had passed And all of a sudden it was like, bam, 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 bam. It like came together and it felt like out of nowhere, but it wasn't out of nowhere. It was after that recovery phase that is so important. So that like spoke volumes to me when I read Rick Rubin's book.
Right. So that is often talked about in other areas. I think for some reason, the one that comes to mind with me is Isaac Newton would take walks. And his whole point of taking these walks
Mhm.
was to think and to reflect on what he'd been working on in the studio.
That happens to me every day. I either go for a walk or a run 7 days a week. And I sometimes wish I usually don't bring my phone with me, but I almost want to dictate because that's especially when I run. Sometimes I come up with, some of my greatest ideas. Like if I have a PD workshop or webinar I have to give coming up, or we're doing one of these podcasts, that endorphin hit that you get, it totally like sparks my creative juices, and I have to like immediately write it down when I get back so I don't forget again.
But every artist musician I know does that. If you're a painter,
Yeah.
if you're a visual artist, you spend a lot of time looking. You spend more time looking actually sometimes than you really do working on the work. Or with music, sometimes songs will write themselves in the back of your head if you really love music. You'll start working on something and then you'll remember it and you'll be singing it and humming it, and all of a sudden you'll start to create other parts. Or when I think about musicians working on recording music, the idea is to listen to the music. You want to listen, you want to hear it in the studio, then you want to hear it in your car.
Oh yeah, because it will sound different in the car versus the studio.
And then you want to hear it
And on headphones.
and with friends.
Yeah.
And watching friends listen to how they're how responding to the music. So
Yeah.
so it's this ebb and flow of being actively engaged but also withdrawing. Yeah, it's like breathing. Yes.
Absolutely. And it really, being creative is, as he's so appropriately titled it, a way of being, right? And so I think we have to embrace all aspects of it, embrace the creative juices when they kind of are flowing, embrace when it's okay to step away and get into the recovery phase and come back to things. And then be willing to put it out there in the world and say, hey, and that was 100% my process. I shared it with one of my staff members, like, hey, play with this, use it a little bit, get me some feedback.
Yeah.
And then guess what? I went back and I was like, okay, that was great. Now can you try this or that? This didn't really, now that you've used it, I'm seeing holes in my process, and now let's try this. And so I think it's also important. I don't remember him talking about, I've read a few books since then, but kind of like, I think it's important to have your brain trust, to have someone to share it with, maybe before you're willing to put it out to the masses, but like, who's your little focus person or focus group to kind of test it on, I think is also really important.
Well, collaboration is huge. Yeah.
Yep. It's the
The
way.
music project, the more collaboration is going to be necessary. They call it, those 4 C's: creativity, communication, critical thinking. All that stuff is in
Yeah,
there. Yeah.
absolutely. All right, everybody. We hope you enjoyed this episode, Creativity as a Way of Being. We will see you next time.
You do.